That's what I think here, that I'm not sure that they understand that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know that there are some people here in the back of this government here that do, but...
Well, what do you see happening in this reversal?
Well, I don't know. I think here that the position that we've taken here, if we stay with the credit side, I think we can lock out these other people here that have extorted from us here our property, and I think they're going to find themselves in the position here that they put us earlier. It might be, the solutions might be easier than we think here. We might just have to sit here and wait for it.
Theoretically, then, if Jesus Christ has been appointed heir, the Greek word is kleronomon, and we are joint heirs with him through adoption as sons, if he is the principle or the nucleus that the energy is returning to as part of his body, that's 1 Corinthians chapter 12, talking about each of us making up that body, that energy is returning to us. That means it's returning to us. So if you say the polarity is reversed with this new millennium taking place, and the evidence we're seeing now in the markets that they have lost control of something that they thought they could never lose control over. In essence, our job then, I think, is to be faithful to Jesus Christ by virtue of the fact that we're not going into debt. We weren't the ones creating this monstrosity. We're the ones that are having these truths revealed to us. There's a little verse. It's at the end of a series of parables. It's in Matthew chapter 13. It's verse 52. And it's a verse that has had me mesmerized, just focusing on that for a number of years now. And it says this. It's after Jesus explains the parables of the sower and the fields to his disciples. And at this point, he asks them if they understand it. And they say yes. That's the only word that's there is yes. And then he says, the kingdom of heaven, well, he doesn't say the kingdom of heaven, but you can relate it to. It is like a scribe who's a student of the law, or is a clerk, who becomes a disciple of the kingdom of heaven, Christ's kingdom, who, like the head of a household, out of his treasure brings forth things new and old. And it's like having this, because all the scribes in the scriptures are always with the Pharisees, so it's not talking about those scribes. Those are the scribes that are condemned. And the Greek word is grammatei, or something like that, which we get the word grammar from. And also, the root word is also where we find the word town clerk, also comes from the same word. So in Luke 11, it uncovers the parable of the Pharisees and the scribes are always together along with the lawyers. There's your unholy trinity as far as I see it. But I'm also saying, though, that if in these last days, at this very last time, Jesus opens up basically the meanings of the scriptures to his people, he reveals it and says, okay, here, now you're going to carry out, like you've been saying, in essence, Roger, the fulfillment, or i.e. the redemption that I have already done on the cross. Now you are going to go act it out, in essence, by what you do and say as you live your life in this world. And so what I'm seeing then is this, as this body of Christ, that is those people, living, breathing people that have trusted in the true Jesus Christ, not the fake ones. But when this faith begins, that he is bringing this body together, and he says in essence that he's the Godhead. He's the head of this body. So as this body comes together, we start carrying out the redemption, and in essence it's him doing it through us. And this chain reaction that he's already set up 2,000 years ago to take place is taking place, and our job is just to carry out whatever it is these guys. Like I said, I don't know all the details yet. I've just been looking at this from a biblical side. And from what you've been sharing with the return of the energy to the nucleus.
Well, when you see, the last time here they saw Jesus, that's when he went up.
Yeah.
Well, that's what happens when you do your first chemistry lesson. And I did this the other day here, so Jim already knows what I'm going to do. I'm drawing the ancient Bunsen burner.
We all used those in chemistry.
The candle. Okay, and so now the student always takes an assignment from his teacher. So it's an assignment that he gets here to do an experiment in the laboratory in his chemistry class. Okay? And of course, the very first thing we have to learn in chemistry is the which would be Faraday's. So this is the mathematics here that you have to know before you can understand any of these things you're talking about and reduce them to something here that we can put our hands on today. And when we were talking about OLEDs, see, the blueprint for the raising of the body again was in that O that went up. Okay? As a matter of physics, we can follow this. Okay? So now, the assignment in physics is to take and pass H2O3 or H2O2 and expose it to the fire. But first of all, we have the atomic weights here. We already know what those are. Okay? And then we pass it through the flame and weigh it again.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
And now what do you got as the end result after you did that?
H2O, water.
Oh my God.
This is before.
Right.
After. I suppose we could call this prior. Or priority. Now, after, you know, the significant thing about this here is the very foundation here of the technology for electromagnets. You can't develop an electromagnet here without this. So magnetism. But you see, and now you'll see the reason for this is because when you pass this through the fire, you heat it up, and the elements that come from Jacob's well, if you want to call it that, it converts it to heat, and then you cannot weigh it in gravity. Okay, it's weightless. Why? Because it's heat. And see, that's what happens here when you say, like, you take a piece of black wool and expose it to the sun. If you've got delicate enough instruments there, you can show that black fabric there increases in weight. But you see, you can't prove it out here with a regular microscope with the naked eye. The only way you can do it is with an electron microscope and with that kind, with charged instruments. See, you can't do it here with just natural methods, except these are natural methods. Okay. So now I pass it through the fire, and all of a sudden here, two atoms of oxygen disappear. And now, how are you going to tell here what was in the original to get fixed? See, we have to fix it now. We have to fix it with that insurance money. How can you prove here what this was over here? Now you got an automobile wreck. How are you going to make them here put up all the money that this thing costs? They're only giving you the wholesale price for it, and you probably paid retail.
Yeah, did. Happened to me.
This is how you do it. You see, you take, okay, let's go back to the beginning and see what kind of a car it was and how much was it worth, okay? And you get, so now you carry that back over to this side of the ledger. Is this the double cross? You're crossing over, okay? So that's how you figure it out. Now, to get into what you were talking about on the scribes, well, this is now, we're not in expansion anymore, we're in contraction. So the general contractor offers a contract, and all the subscribers, they agreed to it, and when they sign the contract, they get a credit. They now have credit that they can go into anywhere in the public system and charge up their goods that they need to commit to the contract. So their credit is good all over the place. So when they sign those instruments here with the suppliers, that's basically creating the money here that's creating the debts. And I used to work on a federal project years ago, and I worked as a welder for American Bridge. And I could see that all the subcontractors on that particular project, most of them filed bankruptcy when they were done. And that's what supplied the general contractor with his bond, because he didn't have anything. It's the subcontractors that put all the substance into the account, and then when they were in there and they were certified finished on their project, they had to put up a bond here before they could be paid the cash, and if they didn't do it, they filed bankruptcy. So they filed bankruptcy, and that in essence committed all of the substance to the general contractor here that was already in the account. But you see, in the meantime, they'd overcharged all their accounts and all the stuff here, and they sold it all in the black market here and stuffed it in their pocket and never reported it. And that's how they're doing it, big time in this country. See? And it's all these people here that are operating here under the Corps of Engineers with license. And they've got a license to steal, and that's exactly what they're doing. They aren't going to like to hear this tape, you see, because that puts a finger on them real good. And they're going to have a hard time to escape it when we're using mathematics like this, see. So anyway, why don't we cut that thing off here and we all take a break here?
Yeah, we need one.
Yeah.
You want to keep it?
Because this
Okay.
applies.
No,
Yeah. Okay, where were we at?
Well, I can find out in a heartbeat.
No,
This thing does play
No,
back.
before you jump, oh, I see. No, you were talking about the metro and the connection with the cities and the monopoly.
Okay, the 200 cities, you see, we were talking about this being really under the rules of monopoly. And I mean literally. That
Incredible.
when I discovered that the bond here that they had used on me to run me through the prison system was not in the hands of the Internal Revenue, but I found out that the state had the account. It had been assigned to the state apparently. And so when I wrote to the state, I finally got them to admit what the financial, or what was really the value of my business and property probably the last time before they started tampering with it in the background. And here I get a notice from the state after it took me about 8 months of writing to them here when I realized that the Internal Revenue did not have my account. And I found out about that because I had a senator from Minnesota that was helping me run the Internal Revenue down. And he got hard on him and made him come to and answer me. And when the answer that I come back was sort of inconclusive in a way, but except that I knew that they did not have the account. They would have had to give it to me because the senator got real hard on him and they got real nasty with him. And so they were nasty enough with him, I was at the point of telling him here, well, just, you don't have to pursue it that aggressive for me, because I see here what they're going to do with you here. You're liable to be in here with me here if you keep pushing.
Like Congressman George Hansen was from Idaho.
Yeah. So anyway, but as a result of that, I knew enough now that I had to look elsewhere for who was the holder of the bond, and I knew that once I could find out who that was, I could confront them here, and that was the basis here for them holding me in prison, and now I could do something about it. See, they just keep hiding it and running. Hide and seek, you know, this here is the Battle of New Orleans here. That's what that song here represents. You know, what was it? The British kept it coming. You remember here, we fired once more, and they turned around and they ran through the briars and they ran through the bushes.
Yeah.
You see? Well, but this is what they were doing. See, they were running away here anytime I was trying to find where they were hiding the claims. Well,
do you have the cassette on?
As a result of that,
What? The cassette, is it on?
Did you turn yours on?
What's that? Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
it's
Oh, yeah, he's
yeah.
covered. No, I've got my,
you were
my
wondering
other
about
recorder's
that, yeah.
taking every
Okay.
word down this room and the next room.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, so where was I at?
The briars and the Brummels and they just
Well,
kept running,
yeah,
they went
but,
through the bushes.
But you wanted to find the holder of the bond.
Right.
Oh, okay. So as soon as the senator made them answer me, and I got a written answer from the Internal Revenue, then I knew they didn't have the bond. And it took me probably 6 or 8 months or so of writing basically to the state to find out here where it was. And it could have been within 2 or 3 states, maybe 4 even. And so I find out here the state of Minnesota had it. They sent me a statement showing the account. And I could agree on that account was the value of my property, because I could see that it represented everything here that I would have put on a bank statement at that time, you know, before they started tampering with my stuff. And which was, at that point, it was $1,389,000,000 approximately, and which was the value of my business at that time. And by the way, when the judgment and commitment order that came against me, you see here, that was actually written out, but it was written out $1,389,000,000. That's because they sold the bond into the international scene. It was $1,389,000. But you see, when you go international, they just add 3 zeros to it.
Right.
But see, I didn't know any of this at this point, because I got the statement back from the state of Minnesota, from the Minnesota Department of Revenue, and it had everything very exact down there that I know that they took it from my property descriptions here back from years back, when all this first started, probably back in about 1975 or 6. And I could tell, because I had a friend of mine that was in the prison there, who was he was from Poland, but he was an engineer. And he was an engineer responsible for building a city, or city facilities. In other words, almost the whole city on the West Bank over in Ramallah, where all the political turmoil was going on, and I'm sure that was one of the reasons they had him rounded up here in the prison, because of all the finances that had to be committed to something like that. So he didn't understand the finances as well as I did, but he understood the bookkeeping and the symbols that were used to designate what it is, because he's used to reading blueprints, you know, here for massive projects. So he was the one that interpreted what that statement from the state meant. And he made a comment in there. He said, some of that is Russian accounting, he said. Because he used to do business in Europe, here in Russia, Italy, all over Europe, and he could speak fluent Russian. And so anyway, so when he starts to pinpoint what this was saying, I got that notice from the state of Minnesota on the 30th of November, 1994. So that night, I conferred with my Polish friend, Yatsy was his name, and I started to compose a letter, and so over the next day or so here, I composed my letter to the Minnesota Department of Revenue, and it basically just said, the accounting I received is accepted for value, or is accepted, I think that's all I used at that time. Please collect the account and pay the bills. That's all I really told them. And I sent it back to them. Well, I sent the letter out on the 2nd of December, which was only 2 days here after I had gotten it. And on the 4th of December, or they got the letter on the 4th of December. I don't even remember anymore how I know that, but I know that they got it on the 4th. And on the 6th of December, Orange County filed for bankruptcy. Well, that didn't mean anything to me at the time. But because I had my Polish friend there, he's used to reading engineering industrial journals. And I'm getting a subscription to the Wall Street Journal. So he starts reading these articles in there, and we're reading about this bankruptcy in Orange County. I mean, that's all over everything. And on one of the inside pages, he was looking at it along with me. We were both sitting down reading the paper in the law library one day, and he said, you should look at this. And so we started to discuss what was on this page. Here was the Orange County article, and he said, that's your account. And he says, here's the reason why. Because he and I had discussed here at the time I went into the military, and we were discussing when the military actually pays bonds. And, you know, and that he said, because the article about the Hubble telescope was on the same page as the Wall Street or the Orange County bankruptcy fiasco, and then how it was laid out, whether it was on the left and whether a lot of it was vertical and horizontal, and where the body of it was, and how it related to the other items that were on that page. And he said, these are industrial journals here, and this is how it relates. And so he was asking me about it. And so the interesting thing was the time frame, because in the Hubble telescope article, it was giving a little bit of the prior history of it. Okay. And my summing it up now indicates that my bond that I was involved with in the military at the time of the original financing of the Hubble telescope, this was probably the military bond that was used here for the initial building of it, or it was one of the sub bonds here that was used here for some subsequent development of it. Maybe, I don't know whether it would have been the initial one or not, because this was in 1956. So from that standpoint, then I began to watch and read the articles. There was something in the paper here about twice a week here on Orange County,
right?
For a whole year and a half.
Sure.
You know, and pretty soon I saw the city here that I lived in here, Moorhead, Minnesota here was listed in there. And at that time, the tally on the number of cities that were involved were like 189 cities. And Moorhead was one of them. Well, then it starts to tell about the brokers that were involved, and it was like Piper Jaffray here as a national broker. And this was the broker that was in the city that I knew of, or in Moorhead, to where they were recipients here of the account that was stolen. Some detective for the Fargo, North Dakota Police Department broke into the into the Internal Revenue files and stole the records. And that was one of them was my account that was sold to Piper Jaffray, the broker. And it was probably done to finance here the municipal projects here of Moorhead through Clay County, where I lived. And I knew I had some personal contact here with the Sheriff's Department regarding my property. I'm not going to get into that here, it's too detailed. But so I knew that there was a nexus there. There was a link between the county, and now this explained what was going on in the background and why this detective from the Fargo Police Department here, at first we didn't know who it was. He claimed to be an Internal Revenue agent. So what he was an agent here that was using my account to finance here all their undercover activities here in the metro area, Fargo and Moorhead. So as I kept reading all of these articles in the Wall Street Journal over the years, it all started to make a picture. And so then they printed extensive articles there on Piper Jaffray confessing to all of their activities and repaying millions and millions of dollars here to the city of Moorhead. Well, come to find out, when they had financed the project right in Moorhead, they sold the account to Orange County. And it has to do with mutual funds funding, or municipal bonds funding mutual funds. That's what it is. So they're using the municipality. They have to identify a principal in the municipality, and that's what they were doing. That's why they stole my account. They sold it to Orange County, and Merrill Lynch was the banker for Orange County on this end. Okay? And the very day that Merrill Lynch got the account, he sold it into the Japanese stock market. That's where it went international. Okay? So now they had to have the principal, in fact, in that international scene. So that's why the bond here went from 1,389,000, or 1,400,000. As to why Orange County, when they filed bankruptcy, the first issue that came out of that bankruptcy filing here was $1,400,000,000. So that's all they did, is they took that account, mainly of mine, and added 3 more zeros to it. So instead of it being 1,400,000, it was 1,400,000,000. Because that's what they do. When they go 3 zeros, they go to another generation. You see? And so, and you see, I have other reasons to believe and know this, because when they first arrested me and started processing me, and not any of the writs or anything here that we used here to where they normally have to come to account here under the statutes, there wasn't any accountability for them. So I reported when I had to put up the bond, it was a $50,000 bond here, and I put up $2,500 and signed a PR here for the $47,500. But I reported a $50,000 transaction to the Internal Revenue Service.